that rigorous count of 30 days. Each mark represented a triumph, a sign of survival. She took another swallow of tea, that salty, barely tepid liquid, picked up her guitar and rested it on her lap. She strummed the strings with the same precision she used to slit her skin. For her, music was another kind of crying. The sounds shook the half-light. She tried the same notes again and again, the same chords, the same dissonances. If it rhymes with blood, if it rhymes with blood. Soon she was distracted by the pounding on the other side of the wall. The neighbors didn't share her passion and had already threatened to call the police and throw her out of the building. She ignored them. The creamy 10th-floor apartment on Chatsovinga Street has been her home for 4 years. Her fingers again drew a senseless calligraphy. What's lurking in the mirror? Pain. What's moving around behind the wall? Calamity. The Korean's shadow came back into her mind. His long, delicate hands, his colorless skin, his soft, barely perceptible muscles, his silence, his fierce silence. Oksana missed that oriental fatigue, that whim he seemed to practice so well. Thinking about his touch turned her stomach. The Korean was like a jade idol, a funerary statue, a god. Which is why she put up no resistance and had accepted becoming the board on which he played his game. Oksana had been singing in a dive at the port for almost a year before he burst in one night, surrounded by an entourage of Russians and Mongols, with the indolence of someone who knows he is the owner of lives and destinies. She supposed he was probably just another of those anachronistic foreign investors who were still sure they'd get rich in Vladivostok, the coast port. When she first got to the city, Japanese men with cell phones and attaché cases stuffed with money were buying everything they found in their path: hotels, casinos, shops. Sorry. It was the Japanese. Laundromats and bordellos. But after a few years of war, they were whipped out by the Boris Zakoni and the local mafiosi. And the dream of transforming the far Russian East into a new Hong Kong vanished like mist. From that time on, only a few Chinese and Koreans with no memory or scruples dared to walk its streets, protected by guerrillas who were armed to the teeth. Surrounded by his men, the Korean shot her a gaze like the point of a needle. Oksana didn't avoid it. When she finished her song, an explosion titled Back Home, one of the thugs ordered her to come to the Korean's table. The chief of the group didn't speak to her. Perhaps he spoke no Russian, and slowly looked her over as if her were a collector. Oksana detected no loss in his manner, as if the Korean were planning a mere business transaction. Close up, he seemed young and lost, barely older than she. His Asian features were tricky, and she imagined him as some lost teenager, a boy disguised as a gangster. The Korean snapped his fingers and his bodyguards all stood up at the same time. A drunk, red-headed giant grabbed Oksana by the arm, dragged her out of the bar, and put her in a black car. "I'm going to give you some advice," he said. "Don't say a word, don't even think of opening your damn mouth. If you take my advice, you may be alive tomorrow." After half an hour of reading around the city, the Russian deposited her at a downtown hotel, not far from the plaza where miners and students usually protested the perennial cuts in electrical power. The Korean received her wearing a purple robe. With no preamble, he signaled her to undress. Oksana did it carefully, without fear, as if she were going to take a bath. she barely trembled. The Korean approached, sniffed her armpits and sex, then felt her muscles, her nipples, and her buttocks, as if he were examining a horse. His fingers were long and cold, but the rest of his body possessed a sweet, almost feminine warmth. Oksana couldn't resist. It was the first time she would sleep with a man. The Korean paused to observe the scars on her thighs and forearms without understanding their meaning. He measured the wounds with the tip of his fingers as if they were still open. Only then did he lead to the bed. Oksana never protested. She would have followed him anywhere. She tried to kiss him, but he covered her mouth. What could he want? He then placed her on the sheets as if she were a doll, removed his robe, and Sweetie stretched out on top of her. Oksana tried to caress him, but again he rejected her. She barely felt the Korean's body on top of her own. He was weightless, like a phantom, like a newborn. He rubbed against her skin awkwardly, vainly trying to excite himself. Finally, he leapt off the bed, put on his robe again, handed Oksana a 100 bill, she'd never seen one before, and let her leave. That night, Oksana dreamed of a tiger without claws. The next day, she waited for the Korean to reappear in the dive down at the port. She looked for him among the shadows, blinded by the lights shining on her face and guitar, and even tried to invoke him with her songs. Waiting for him gives me more pleasure than having a good time with someone else. Oksana was ecstatic because of the Korean. She imagined him on top of her, alone and sad, mute, denied pleasure. Who could this unfortunate creature be? Why would he take notice of her? Why would he choose her? Why had he paid for his consolation? Ever since she came to Vladivostok, Oksana had drowned herself in the skin of other women, pale, moribund females with no identity or history, typical frontier types. Most were, like her, artists, or at least that's what they said. But there were also workers and secretaries, mother and wives, and even a model who was married to a celebrated mafioso. All of them had satisfied her desire. All of them had revived her. All of them had allowed her to discover herself. But none had obsessed her as he did. A powerful, impotent man, a male who in bed was not different from a woman. Who was that Korean who came in here a few days ago? She asked Kornei Ivanovich, the owner of the dive. It's probably better you don't know, he answered, as obtuse as usual. Know where I can find him? It's probably better if you don't look for him. It isn't you who comforts me. It's not of you I ask forgiveness. It's not at your feet where I fall. It's not you I fear at night. Vladivostok, the ghost port, is the last port in the world, Oksana wrote in her blue notebook, the far end of civilization, the end of the world. More than a diary, Oksana was writing a mixed series of aphorisms, poems, songs, stories, and scattered fragments, all addressed to her adored Anna Akhmatova, whose picture watched over her work. The poet was still Oksana's guide, her model, a woman who could withstand the windstorm of history, a woman who could stay on her feet like the last wall holding of barbarism, when all the others were failing. And now, Oksana not only knew her poems by heart but barely modified, she made them reappear in her songs. 3 weeks after their first encounter, the Korean returned to the dive with the same impudent ease. Oksana sang him the verses she dedicated to him. Don't give me anything to remember you. I know how short memory is. The Korean didn't smile, didn't change his expression, paid no attention to her words or the echoes of her guitar. He didn't